The Hebel-white desk in my father's study was a vast, unforgiving continent of polished mahogany. It was a desk built not for work, but for pronouncements. It's a place from which ultimatums were issued and fates were decided. For 20 years, I had been summoned to this room to account for my minor transgressions, a C+ in trigonometry, a missed curfew, a dent in the fender of the family's immaculate Mercedes. But this was different. I was 20 years old, a student at a prestigious university, and I had been called home from my summer internship in New York for this, an emergency family meeting. My father, Edward Vance, sat behind the desk, a king on his throne. He was 55, but looked a decade younger. His salt and pepper hair perfectly coiffed, his tailored suit exuding an aura of effortless power. He was a senior partner at the most powerful corporate law firm in Connecticut. A man who sat on 3 charity boards and whose name was whispered with a kind of reverent awe at the Greenwich Country Club. He was a pillar of the community, a titan of industry, a man of unimpeachable character. And it seemed, was his greatest disappointment. My mother, Catherine, sat in a wing-back chair to my right, a ghost in a cashmere sweater set. She was beautiful, elegant, and utterly, completely terrified of the man she was married to. She was not a participant in this meeting. She was a hostage, her presence required to present a united parental front. She stared at a point on the Persian rug, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white. "Amelia," my father began, his voice a low, calm, and terrifyingly reasonable baritone. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. His disappointment was a weapon far more effective than rage. "Your mother and I are worried." "About you? Worried?" I asked, my own voice a reedy, defiant squeak. "About what?" "My grades are fine. Not in any trouble." "We're not talking about your grades," he said, steepling his fingers. "We're talking about you, your choices, the person you are becoming." He paused, letting the weight of his judgment settle in the quiet, wood-paneled room, and then he reached into the top drawer of his desk. My blood ran cold. He pulled out a small, leather-bound book with a broken clasp. A book with a faded, embossed rose on the cover. It's my diary. He placed it on the polished surface of the desk between us. It looked small and fragile and terribly, terribly violated. "I was looking for a stamp." "In your room," he said, the lie so bald, so effortless, it took my breath away. "And this fell from your bookshelf." I couldn't speak. A wave of nausea and pure, unadulterated violation washed over me. The one place in this entire, suffocating house that had been mine, the one place I could be honest, the one place my own thoughts were safe. And he had broken into it. He had trespassed into my very soul. I was concerned, he continued, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "So I read it." He said it so simply, as if he were admitting to reading the morning paper. As if he had a fundamental, God-given right to the contents of my own head. "And what I found," he said, his eyes turning to chips of ice, "was deeply, deeply disturbing." For the next 20 minutes, he held court. He did not read from the diary. That would have been too crude, too emotional. Instead, he dissected it. He quoted my own words back to me from memory, his lawyer's mind having catalogued my secrets like evidence in a criminal trial. He was the prosecutor, and my own private thoughts were the star witness against me. He talked about the poetry I had written, which he called morbid and nihilistic. He talked about the entry where I had admitted to trying a pot brownie at a party, which he called a descent into criminal deviancy. He talked about the pages where I had questioned my own sexuality, my confusing nascent feelings for a girl in my art history class, which he referred to as a phase of profound and dangerous confusion that must be corrected immediately. He was a surgeon, cutting me open with my own words, laying out my insides on his mahogany desk for inspection. With every sentence, he was systematically shaming me, pathologizing my normal, messy 20-year-old thoughts and turning them into character flaws, into diseases that needed to be cured. My mother wept silently in her chair. She did not look at me. But the most disturbing part, Amelia, he said, his voice dropping, was the disrespect. The ingratitude, the way you write about this family. He leaned forward, his eyes locking on mine. The things you said about me, about your mother. It's the contempt you seem to have for the life we have worked so hard to provide for you. I had written that I felt suffocated, that our perfect manicured life in Greenwich felt like a beautiful gilded cage, that his obsession with reputation and appearances was a hollow, empty pursuit. I had written the truth, and he was calling it a crime. This family has a reputation, he said, his voice as cold and hard as granite. A legacy. And you, with your secrets, your confusion, your ingratitude. You are a threat to that legacy. You are a liability. He then laid out the terms of my new corrected life. I would withdraw from my summer internship in New York, a city he now deemed a corrupting influence. I would spend the rest of the summer at home. I would begin seeing a therapist of his choosing, a specialist who could help me with my issues. He would be monitoring my phone calls, my emails. My privacy, he informed me, was a privilege I had not yet earned. We are doing this because we love you, Amelia, he concluded, the word love sounding like a threat. We are doing this to protect you from yourself. And to protect this family. He closed his hands over my diary, his ownership of it now absolute. The trial was over. The verdict was in. I was guilty, and my sentence was a complete and total erasure of myself. I just sat there, numb, violated, and utterly, completely powerless. My soul had been strip-searched, and I had been found wanting. But then, as he was delivering his final paternalistic pronouncements, my eyes drifted from his face to the chaos of his usually immaculate desk. In his haste to stage this intervention, he had left things out of place. And peeking out from under a stack of legal briefs, I saw it. It was another book, a ledger, not one of his official gold-embossed ledgers from his law firm. This one was smaller, plain bound in black moleskin. It was a book I had never seen before. And as he spoke, he unconsciously, nervously, shifted a stack of papers to cover it more completely. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, a flicker of concealment. But in that moment, in the wreckage of my own violated privacy, it was a flare in the darkness, the pillar of the community, the man of unimpeachable character. My father, it seemed, had secrets of his own. The thought, small and vengeful, was a single defiant seed planted in the salted earth of my humiliation. And in the days that followed, as I lived out my sentence in the silent, suffocating prison of my childhood home, that seed began to sprout. My life, after the intervention, became a masterpiece of theatrical submission. On the outside, I was the perfect, chastened daughter. I was quiet, I was compliant, I was a ghost in the hallways of my own home. I attended my twice-weekly sessions with Dr. Albright, the therapist. My father had chosen a woman with kind eyes and a spine made of jello who was clearly on his payroll. I would sit in her plush office surrounded by abstract art and tastefully dying plants, and I would talk about my confusion and my anger issues in a vague, noncommittal way. I would give her just enough to write in her reports to my father that I was making progress. I adhered to my new 10 o'clock curfew. I allowed my father to read my text messages every night, a humiliating ritual in which I would hand over my phone and stand there, my insides churning with a cold, silent rage as he scrolled through my bland, meaningless conversations with my few remaining friends. I was a model prisoner, but on the inside, in the last remaining private space of my own mind, I was not a prisoner. I was a spy. My humiliation and pain from that day in my father's study had not broken me. It had done something far more dangerous. It had focused me. The scattered emotional rebellion of my diary had been replaced by a single, Cold and diamond-hard objective. I would find his secrets, and I would burn his perfect world to the ground with them. My investigation began with a problem of access. My father's study, the scene of my violation, was his fortress. His laptop, his files, his secrets, they were all in there. And after my intervention, I was unofficially barred from entry. I needed a key, a reason to be in that room at that desk. The universe, in a rare act of kindness, provided one for me. I was in the kitchen one morning making a cup of tea when my father strode in, his briefcase in hand. He was on his phone barking orders at some unfortunate junior associate. He was so engrossed in his own self-importance that he didn't see the glass of water I had left on the counter. His briefcase swung, and the glass went flying, its contents arcing through the air in a perfect slow motion. Wave that crashed directly onto my open laptop. The screen flickered, hissed, and went black. My father didn't even break stride. "Deal with it, Henderson." He barked into his phone and then walked out the door. I looked at my dead laptop. It was a 3-year-old machine that had been on its last legs anyway, okay? And it was now the most beautiful, most useful object I owned. It was my Trojan horse. That evening, I approached my father with a carefully rehearsed performance of a distraught, responsible student. "Dad," I said, my voice full of a convincing, anxious tremor, "my laptop is completely fried. I have a 10-page paper for my summer course due on Friday, and I haven't even started my research." He looked up from the Wall Street Journal, his expression one of pure irritation. My problems were always an inconvenience to him. "So go to the library," he said. "I would," I said, my voice dropping to a pathetic whisper. "But the paper is on intellectual property law in the digital age. All of the primary sources are online behind the university's firewall. I need a secure private computer. A library computer. Anyone could see my work." I let the words hang in the air. A perfect piece of psychological bait. Privacy, security. The very things he had stripped from me, now used as a tool. He sighed, a long, martyred sound. "Fine," he said, the word dripping with condescension. "You can use the laptop in my study. But I want that paper finished by Friday, and I want to see it. And you are not to touch anything else on that desk. Is that understood?" "Yes, Dad," I said, my voice full of a groveling daughterly gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I had the key." Phase 1 of my operation was the keylogger. I had spent the previous week researching. I had purchased a small, innocuous-looking USB drive that was, in fact, a sophisticated piece of spyware. It required less than 30 seconds of physical contact with the target computer to install its payload. The next afternoon, I went into his study. The room was exactly as I remembered it. A tomb of mahogany and leather, smelling of old books and my father's quiet, suffocating authority. I sat down at his desk in his chair. I felt a cold thrill of transgression. I powered on his laptop and I waited. I needed him to enter his password. He came in an hour later. "How's the paper coming?" he asked, his tone that of a warden checking on a prisoner. "It's good," I lied. "I'm just taking a small break." He came and stood behind me, his presence a heavy weight at my back. He reached over my shoulder and logged me out of the university portal. "You should be working, not taking breaks," he said. And then he logged himself in, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a familiar, arrogant confidence. I didn't watch his hands. I watched the screen. I burned the sequence of dots into my memory. 8 characters, a capital letter, a number. It was enough. He left. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway for his daily trip to the country club. I took the small USB drive from my pocket. Hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I plugged it into the side of his laptop. A small window popped up, a simple gray loading bar. It was the longest 15 seconds of my life. The bar filled, its installation complete. I pulled the drive out, slipped it back into my pocket, and took a deep, shuddering breath. Phase 1 was complete. I now had a secret, invisible window into his digital world. Every email he wrote, every password he typed, every website he visited would all be logged and emailed to a dummy account I had created for this very purpose. Phase 2 was the phone. It was more difficult, more dangerous. I needed physical access to his phone for at least 15 minutes. He guarded it like a state secret. But he had a weakness, a chink in his armor of perfect, meticulous control. Every night before he went to bed, he would plug his phone in to charge on the counter in the kitchen. A habit from a time before he had so much to hide. That night, I waited in my room until 2 in the morning. The house was a crypt. I slipped out of my room, my feet silent on the thick Persian runners that lined the hallways. The kitchen was dark, illuminated only by the faint, ghostly green light of the microwave clock. And there it was, its iPhone plugged into the wall, a small, sleeping serpent. I had my own laptop with me, the cloning software I had downloaded, already open. I had practiced on my own phone a dozen times. I knew what to do. I unplugged his phone and connected it to my computer. The screen lit up. Enter passcode. My heart hammered against my ribs. I hadn't been able to get his phones. Passcode, the keylogger, only worked on his laptop. At a single, desperate chance. My father was a creature of habit and monumental ego. His laptop password was Vance #1. It was a long shot. Stupidly long shot. My fingers trembled as I typed it in. 1267. The numbers from the year he made partner at his firm. The phone unlocked. I almost laughed out loud. The sheer, arrogant predictability of the man. I started the cloning software. A progress bar appeared on my screen. Cloning iPhone estimated time. 12 minutes. It was an eternity. I sat there on the cold tile floor of the kitchen, watching the thin blue line creep across the screen, my ears straining for any sound from upstairs. Every creak of the old house was the sound of my father coming down the stairs. Every distant car was the sound of my imminent discovery. The bar reached 100%. Cloning complete. I quickly, quietly disconnected his phone, plugged it back into the wall charger, and slipped back to my room. My laptop clutched to my chest like a stolen jewel. I now had a perfect real-time copy of his entire digital life in the palm of my hand. Phase 3 was the ledger. The black moleskin book I had seen on his desk, its anxious, furtive gesture to hide it, was the thing that had started it all. I knew, with a deep, primal certainty, that it was the key. I had to wait for days for my opportunity. He was playing in a charity golf tournament. It's an all-day affair that was a cornerstone of his public performance as a community benefactor. My mother was with him, playing the part of the supportive, adoring wife. I had the house to myself. I went back into the study. This time, I was not a guest. I was an intruder. Went straight to his desk. I knew from the keylogger that he kept his most important keys in the back of the bottom right drawer. I found the small brass key I was looking for. I used it to unlock the deep central drawer of the desk, the one that was his inner sanctum. And there it was, the black moleskin ledger. It felt heavy in my hands, dense with secrets. I opened it. It was not a financial ledger, not in the traditional sense. It was a record of a second life. The pages were filled with my father's neat, controlled script, a meticulous accounting of a world of lies. There were names, dates, and numbers. The name that appeared most often was Annalise. The numbers were payments, thousands of dollars every month. Annalise rent APT 7B, $4,500. Annalise car payment, BMW, $850. Annalise Cartier bracelet, $6,200. I now had a name. I went to the cloned copy of his phone on my laptop. I searched his contacts. Annalise Croy. I searched his emails. There were hundreds of them. Love letters disguised as business correspondence. Plans for secret trips to the city. Arguments, reconciliations. A rich, detailed, and nauseatingly intimate history of a 10-year affair. I found her address, a luxury apartment on the Upper East Side. An apartment I was apparently paying for. But the affair, as ugly and hypocritical as it was not the real secret. The real secret was the money. Where was it coming from? Our family was wealthy, but not this wealthy. It's not secret BMW and a $5,000-a-month apartment. Wealthy? The answer was in the ledger. It was a Rosetta Stone of his financial crimes. On the left side of each page were the payments to Annalise. On the right side were a series of cryptic notes: Sterling Trust Account Transfer, J.P. Henderson Escrow, Disbursement, Rothman Estate Fund Adjustment. I didn't understand at first, but the keylogger gave me the passwords I needed. I logged into my father's personal bank accounts. And then, using the information from the ledger, I logged into his professional accounts at the law firm. And I saw it. The crime in all its cold digital glory. My father, the titan of corporate law, the man of unimpeachable character, was an embezzler. He was systematically draining money from his clients' trust and escrow accounts sacred, untouchable funds, and funneling it into a series of offshore shell corporations. From there, he would transfer it to a personal secret account, the one he used to fund his second life with Annalise. It was a massive, complex, and breathtakingly arrogant scheme. He was stealing from the dead, from widows, from the orphaned, children of his wealthiest clients. And the ledger was his personal record of the crime, a monument to his own hypocrisy. He wasn't just a philanderer, he was a ghoul. I sat on the floor of his study, the ledger open on my lap, the evidence glowing on the laptop screen in front of me. The foundation of my entire life, the image of my father, of my perfect, privileged family, had just been reduced to a pile of dust and ash. The man who had shamed me for my secrets, for my minor 20-year-old transgressions, was a common, greedy, and spectacular criminal. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I felt a profound, bottomless wave of disgust and a deep, sorrowful ache for my mother. A woman who had built her entire life around a man who was nothing but a beautiful, well-dressed lie. I took out my phone. With a cold, methodical precision that would have made my father proud, I began to take pictures, page after page, every incriminating email, every text message, every single entry in his book of secrets. I documented the evidence of his downfall. When I was done, I put the ledger back in the drawer, locked it, and put the key back where I had found it. I left the study, closing the door softly behind me. The investigation was over. I had his secrets. I had his life, his entire, carefully constructed world in the palm of my hand. The question was no longer if I could destroy him. The question was how, in the weeks following my discovery, I became a ghost. Not the compliant, chastened ghost my father believed me to be, but a different kind of phantom entirely. I was a quiet, invisible intelligence agency of one, operating deep within enemy territory. I possessed the kind of power that comes only from knowing the absolute ugly truth when everyone else is living in a beautifully constructed lie. My father's secrets were no longer a suspicion. They were a data set. I had his life, his real life, cloned on my laptop, perfect, damning digital facsimile of the man, ready to be dissected. I had the evidence, but I needed a venue, a stage, a guillotine. It would not be enough to simply expose him to my mother. Her spirit had been so thoroughly crushed by decades of his control that she would likely find a way to absorb the blow, to rationalize it, to blame herself. No, my revenge could not be a private domestic affair. He had violated my private world and then publicly, within the confines of our family, shamed me for it. My revenge had to be the inverse. I had to take his private sins and expose them. To his public world, I needed to destroy the one thing he truly loved, his reputation. The opportunity when it arrived was a piece of poetry so perfect, so exquisitely ironic. It could only have been delivered by a god with a wicked sense of humor. I was scrolling through the cloned copy of his emails one evening, an act that had become my nightly ritual. I was looking for new evidence, but instead I found a series of messages between him and a high-end event planner. The subject line was Vance's 25th anniversary gala. I clicked open the email chain. My breath caught in my throat. My father, the man who had been carrying on a decade-long affair, the man who was actively embezzling money to fund a secret life with his mistress, was planning a massive, lavish, no-expenses barred gala to celebrate his 25th wedding anniversary to my mother. It was a public performance of a perfect marriage, a grand, theatrical lie designed to reinforce his image as a devoted husband and family man. It was going to be the social event of the season in Greenwich, a gathering of all the people whose respect he craved, his law partners, his wealthy clients, the local politicians, the charity board members. He was building the stage for his own execution, and he was going to pay for it with stolen money. I leaned back in my chair and laughed. It was a strange, rusty sound, a laugh that was devoid of all humor. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place. I had found my weapon. A week later, my mother provided the delivery system. She came to my room, a rare occurrence. She'd been treating me with a kind of gentle, sorrowful distance since the intervention, as if I were a sick patient she didn't know how to speak to. "Amelia, darling," she began, her voice a soft, hesitant murmur. She perched on the edge of my bed, her hands twisting a silk scarf in her lap. "Your father and I, well, you know our anniversary is coming up. We're having a little party. A little party. It's 300 guests at the Belhaven Club, a string quartet, and a champagne fountain." "That's nice, Mom," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Well," she continued, avoiding my eyes, "I wanted to do something special, a tribute to your father, to our life together. And you're so wonderful with all of this technology." She gestured vaguely towards my laptop. "I was hoping. Could you put together a little slideshow for us? You know, photos, a bit of music, a celebration of our family." There it was, the request. The most perfect, devastating, and deeply ironic request I could have ever imagined. My own mother, the primary victim of his lies, was now commissioning the very tool of his destruction. It was a moment of Shakespearean tragedy, and she was the only one in the room who didn't know it. "Of course, Mom," I said, my voice soft. I reached out and squeezed her hand. Her skin was cold. I would be honored. My bedroom, the place of my former teenage angst, became a digital abattoir. The project became my singular obsession. I was no longer a student, no longer a daughter. I was a filmmaker, a documentarian of a beautiful lie and the ugly truth that lay beneath it. The first part of the process was an act of profound and painful archaeology. My mother gave me boxes and boxes of old family photos, albums, and loose prints that smelled of dust and time. Spent days scanning them, digitizing our entire family history. It was a strange kind of torture. I saw myself as a gap-toothed 7-year-old sitting on my father's shoulders at a 4th of July parade. I saw him teaching me to ride a bike, his hands steady on the back of the seat. I saw us on family vacations, smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower, the Grand Canyon, the canals of Venice. In every photo, he was the perfect father, adoring, proud, present. And I knew now that it was all a performance. I would look at a picture of us, a happy family of 3 on a beach in Nantucket, and I would check the date, August 2015, and then I would go to the ledger, to the emails, and I would see that 3 days before that photo was taken, he'd wired $7,000 to Annalise for what he'd called a design consultation. I grieved for the girl in those photographs. The girl who had believed in that man, who had believed in that family. And with every scanned image, a layer of my own sentimentality was stripped away, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of the truth. He was not my father. It was a character he was playing. I was about to write his final scene. Once I had the happy family narrative constructed, I began to gather the other materials. The ugly truths. I spent hours in my room, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my face in the dark. I downloaded the emails between him and Annalise, the ones filled with sickeningly sweet pet names and plans for their secret getaways. I took high-resolution photographs of every single page of the black moleskin ledger. Its neat columns a testament to his meticulous criminality. I found Annalise's social media profiles. She was a beautiful 30-something art dealer, and her accounts were a gallery of the life my father had bought her. There she was, wearing the Cartier bracelet. There she was, driving the BMW. And there, in a photo from a gallery opening last spring. A picture she had foolishly allowed a friend to tag her in was my father. Standing just behind her, his hand possessively on her back, a proprietary smile on his face. It was the only photograph of them together I could find, was all I needed. Then came the art of the edit. I downloaded a sophisticated video editing software and taught myself how to use it. I was no longer just a documentarian. I was a propagandist. My weapon would not be a crude instrument of exposé. It would be a masterpiece of psychological warfare. I chose the music first. The first half would be set to a soft, sentimental piano piece, the kind of music that makes old women weep at weddings. The second half, the transition, would be marked by a single discordant piano chord. And then a shift into a dark, ominous, and atmospheric piece of classical music. I started the video with The Lies. It's a beautiful, sweeping montage of my parents' wedding photos. It's my mother, young and radiant. My father, handsome and adoring. Then photos of me as a baby, taking my first steps, blowing out birthday candles. Happy family vacations, Christmases, graduations. It was a perfect 5-minute tribute to the Vance family, the family everyone in Greenwich thought they knew. And then the pivot. The editing was a delicate surgical process. I would show a photo of my parents smiling on their 20th anniversary, and I would flash for just a fraction of a second. A line from one of his emails to Annalise, dated the very next day. Last night was a bore. I could only think of you. I would show a video of my father giving a speech at a charity gala, talking about the importance of integrity and fiscal responsibility. And I would immediately follow it with a slow, deliberate zoom on a scanned page from his ledger. The name Sterling Trust Account and the words illegal disbursement clearly visible. A red circle I had added highlighting the 7-figure sum. I cross-cut images of my mother laughing oblivious, with screenshots of my father's secret bank statements, showing the river of money flowing out of our lives and into his other one. I took the photograph of him with Annalise and I placed it side by side with a photo of him and my mother from that same week. The same suit, the same tie, the same lie. The midpoint of my project, the moment the weapon was truly armed, came late one night, about a week before the party. I had finished the final cut. I sat in my room, the house dark and silent, and I put on my headphones to watch the entire 10-minute video for the first time. It was more devastating than I had even imagined. The slow, sickening descent from sentimental family tribute to cold, hard criminal indictment was a work of art. It was a character assassination executed with the precision of a surgeon and the cold, vengeful heart of a wronged daughter. It was a monster. A beautiful, terrible, and perfect monster. And I had created it. As the final damning image of the secret bank statement faded to black, I took off my headphones. The silence in my room was absolute. I was shaking, not with fear or with rage, but with the terrifying absolute weight of the power I now held. With a single click of a button, I could detonate a bomb in the middle of my own life, and the fallout would be catastrophic. I had the power to destroy him, and in doing so, I would destroy my mother. I would destroy everything. I saved the final file. I dragged it onto a small, innocuous-looking USB drive. I clicked eject. The on-screen icon vanished. The weapon was loaded. I picked up the small silver thumb drive. It was cool and light in my hand. It was the key to my father's destruction, to my mother's heartbreak, to my own terrible, necessary, and Pyrrhic victory. I labeled it, in my neatest script, Vance Anniversary Tribute. All I had to do now was wait for the party. The week of the party, our house transformed into a command center for a military-style operation in floral arrangements and champagne logistics. An army of strangers descended upon us. Florists with armloads of cream-colored roses and magnolias, their cloying sweetness filling every room. Caterers in crisp whites taking inventory of my mother's china. A frazzled event planner with a headset and a clipboard who seemed to be in a constant state of low-grade panic. The house buzzed with a frantic, expensive energy, all of it, orchestrated to create a perfect, flawless evening that would celebrate a 25-year-long lie. I moved through the chaos like a ghost, an observer in my own home. My weapon, the small silver USB drive, was hidden in the false bottom of my jewelry box, a cold, dense secret. My work was done. The video was complete. Now all I had to do was wait. This new and forced idleness was a special kind of torture, with the methodical, all-consuming work of the investigation and the video editing gone. There was nothing to distract me from the profound, terrifying gravity of what I was about to do. My certainty, which had felt so absolute in the isolation of my own rage, began to develop hairline fractures. The trigger, the moment the first real crack appeared in my resolve, came on Wednesday evening, 3 days before the party. I was coming downstairs to get a glass of water. The house was quiet, the army of party planners gone for the night. As I reached the bottom of the grand curving staircase, I heard music coming from the ballroom. It was a soft, old, familiar song. Etta James, At Last, my parents' wedding song. I stopped in the shadows of the hallway. I peeked into the vast, empty ballroom. The furniture had been cleared out, leaving a wide, polished dance floor that reflected the soft glow of the chandeliers. And in the center of the room, my parents were dancing. My father had his hand on the small of my mother's back. Her head was resting on his shoulder. They were moving in a slow, familiar shuffle, their bodies perfectly attuned to each other after 3 decades together. My father was humming along to the music, his voice a low, gentle rumble. My mother was smiling. It was not her usual tense socialite smile. This was a real one. A soft, unguarded, and genuinely happy smile that reached all the way to her eyes. In the warm, forgiving light of the chandelier, she looked like the young, hopeful girl from her wedding photos, the girl who had no idea the man holding her was a fiction, a carefully constructed character who would, in a few short days, break her heart in front of 300 of their closest friends. And I was the one who was going to do it. I watched them, my throat tight, a profound and sickening wave of guilt washing over me. In my righteous fury, in my quest for my own eye for an eye justice, I had thought of my mother as a casualty, a necessary piece of collateral damage in my war against my father. But seeing her now, seeing that small, fragile, and completely undeserved smile, I was forced to confront the true, monstrous nature of my plan. I was not just exposing a criminal. I was not just punishing a hypocrite. I was going to take that smile, that last, beautiful shred of her innocent happiness, and I was going to extinguish it, publicly and brutally. The video I had created was not a weapon aimed only at my father. It was a bomb, and my mother was standing at ground zero. I retreated back up the stairs, my feet silent on the thick runner. I went to my room and closed the door, my heart hammering. I took the USB drive from its hiding place. It felt cold and heavy in my hand, like a small polished stone from a grave. Look at her, the voice of mercy, which I had thought I'd successfully silenced, whispered in my head. She is the real victim here. Not you, her, and your idea of justice is to inflict the most profound and public humiliation imaginable upon her. to make her the object of pity and gossip for the rest of her life. This isn't justice, Amelia. This is an act of spectacular, selfish cruelty. The voice was right. I was taking away my mother's choice. I was making the decision for her that the truth, in its most brutal and public form, was better than the comfortable lie she had been living. Did I have that right? Who was I to decide that her fragile peace was worth less than my need for revenge? I imagined the moment, the lights in the ballroom dimming, the happy, smiling faces turning to the screen. My mother sitting at the head table, her hand in my father's, a proud, happy tear in her eye as the first photos of their wedding appeared. And then the shift. The dissonant chord. The first email to Annalise. I imagined the look of confusion on my mother's face. Then the dawning horror. The slow, public unraveling of her entire life, her entire identity, while 300 people watched, her gasp, her sob, her utter, complete, and total devastation. I stumbled into my bathroom and retched into the toilet, my body convulsing with the sheer, ugly poison of what I had planned. I went back into my room, my legs shaking. I held the USB drive in my hand. I could destroy it. Right now. I could snap this small plastic casing in two, drop it in a glass of water, and it would all be over. I could let the party happen. I could let my mother have her one perfect, happy night. I could let my father get away with it. I could swallow my rage, my pain, my need for justice, and I could choose mercy. For her, my hand closed around the drive, my knuckles white. I was going to do it. I was going to break it. I was going to choose my mother. And then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my father, my study. Now, my blood ran cold. I slipped the USB drive back into its hiding place and went downstairs, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. He was sitting behind his mahogany desk, the picture of paternal authority. The room was exactly as it had been during the intervention, a place of judgment and control. "Close the door," he said, his voice flat. I did as I was told. He gestured to the chair opposite him, the same chair I had sat in when he had dissected my soul. "Amelia," he began, his tone that of a CEO addressing a problematic subordinate. "We are 3 days away from the anniversary party. It's an event that is very important to this family's reputation and to your mother's happiness. I will not have it marred by any sullenness or adolescent theatrics. Your attitude of late has been less than satisfactory. I need to know that you understand the importance of presenting a happy, united front." "I understand," I said, my voice a monotone. "Good," he said. He slid a thick, leather-bound document across the desk toward me. "Because we also need to discuss your future." I looked at the document. The cover was embossed with the name of his law firm, Vance Family Trust, stipulations and conditions. "I have taken the liberty," he said, steepling his fingers, "of having my estate attorneys draw up the preliminary paperwork for your inheritance trust. It is, as you can see, a very generous trust. It will ensure that you are financially secure for the rest of your life." He paused, letting the weight of his generosity settle in the room. "However," he continued, his voice hardening slightly, "it is not without conditions." I opened the document, my eye scanned the dense, legalistic prose, and then I saw them. The behavioral clauses. Hey, my inheritance, my own future, was to be held contingent upon a series of vaguely worded but deeply sinister conditions. My access to the funds would be at the discretion of a trustee. It would be contingent upon my maintaining the Vance family's standards of personal and professional conduct. It stipulated that any choice of spouse, any major career decision, and even my place of residence would be subject to the advisement and approval of the trustee. It was a cage, a beautiful, gilded, and legally binding cage. He wasn't just controlling my life now while I was under his roof. He was creating a mechanism to control me for the rest of his life and beyond. He was using the promise of my own inheritance to purchase my eternal compliance. The therapy, the curfew, the reading of my texts, that was just the beginning. This was the end game. This was a life sentence. "This is a way of ensuring you make smart choices, Amelia," he said, his voice a smooth, reasonable lie. "It is a way for me to protect you, to guide you." I looked up from the document, from the blueprint of my own lifelong imprisonment, and I looked at him. I saw not a father. I saw a monster. A smiling, charming, and utterly ruthless monster who would not stop until he had consumed my entire life, my entire identity, and remade me in his own perfect hollow image. My doubt, my guilt, my thoughts of mercy, they were all burned away in the pure, white-hot fire of this final, breathtaking act of cruelty. He thought I was a liability. He thought I was a problem to be managed. He had no idea what I was. My revenge was no longer just about punishing him for the past. It was about saving myself from the future. It was not just an act of vengeance. It was an act of profound and desperate self-preservation. If I did not detonate the bomb I had created, I would spend the rest of my life as a prisoner in his perfect, beautiful, and suffocating world. The public destruction of his reputation was the only key that could ever set me free. I stood up. "I understand perfectly, Dad," I said, my voice as calm and cold as the grave. "Thank you for being so thorough." I walked out of his study, leaving the leather-bound cage on his desk. I went back to my room. The war in my head was over. Justice and mercy were no longer at odds. I now understood that, for me, and maybe even for my mother, the most merciful act I could possibly perform was to tell the absolute, unvarnished, and catastrophic truth. The morning of the party, I woke up feeling a strange, serene calm. Showered, I did my hair. I put on the simple, elegant dress I had chosen. I was no longer a daughter wrestling with a moral dilemma. I was an executioner walking to the gallows. And for the first time in my entire suffocating life, I felt a breathtaking sense of freedom. I took the small silver USB drive from its hiding place. I held it in my palm. It was no longer a weapon of revenge. It was my key, my escape plan. I dropped it into my small, beaded evening bag and went downstairs to join the party. The Bellhaven Club on the last Saturday in August was a living fantasy. It was a world plucked directly from the pages of a magazine my mother subscribed to, a world of impossible, effortless perfection. 1,000 cream-colored roses seemed to bloom from every surface, their scent mixing with the salty air drifting in from the Long Island Sound. A string quartet played softly in the corner of a grand, sweeping ballroom, their music a tasteful, expensive murmur beneath the polite chatter of 300 of Connecticut's most powerful and influential people. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through the crowd, their silver trays laden with champagne flutes and delicate jewel-like canapes. It was the apotheosis of my father's entire existence, a carefully curated, breathtakingly expensive performance of his own success. And I was the bomb, ticking silently in the center of the room. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in a dark blue dress, a fixed, polite smile on my lips. My evening bag, containing the small silver USB drive, was a cold, heavy weight in my silv, and we silver weight in my hand. People I had known my entire life came up to me, their faces soft with sympathy. They had all, of course, been informed of my recent troubles. Amelia Darling, one of my mother's friends, a woman with a face pulled tight from surgery, said, squeezing my arm, "Your father told us you've been having a difficult summer. We're all so glad to see you looking so composed." Composed. That was the word they used for a daughter who had been successfully brought back into the fold. I was a problem that had been solved, an unsightly emotional display that had been tidied up just in time for the party. I saw my mother across the room. She was radiant, a vision in a pale silver gown that shimmered under the light of the crystal chandeliers. She was laughing, a genuine, unburdened sound that I hadn't heard in years. She was the picture of a happy, beloved wife, the queen of this perfect, glittering court. The sight of her joy was a physical pain, a sharp, twisting knife in my gut. "This is your last happy night," I thought. The words a cold, silent prayer. "I am so, so sorry." My father was holding court by the towering seven-tiered wedding cake, a perfect replica of the one from their wedding. He was magnetic, charming, his hand resting possessively on my mother's back. He was accepting the congratulations and tributes of his peers, soaking in their admiration like a desert plant soaking in a rare rain. He caught my eye across the room and gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of ownership. "Daughter," the nod said, "look at her, so beautiful, so composed, so completely and utterly mine." After an hour of mingling, the guests were seated. The dinner was served, the wine was poured, and then came the toasts. A senior partner from my father's firm stood up, a portly, florid man named Mr. Abernathy. He raised his glass. "To Edward Vance," he boomed, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room. A man whose name has become synonymous with two words: integrity and success. In all my years, I have never met a lawyer with a stronger moral compass. A wave of applause. I took a slow sip of water, the liquid cold and tasteless in my mouth. Next, a family friend, a woman who had been my mother's maid of honor, stood up. She spoke of their enduring love, their perfect marriage. "It's 25 years, she said, her voice thick with emotion. "In this day and age, a true inspiration. Catherine and Edward are a testament to the power of loyalty, trust, and unwavering devotion." I could feel the gazes of the people at my table on me, and I kept my expression a perfect, placid blank. My insides were churning. The hypocrisy was a physical, nauseating force. And then it was my father's turn. He stood up, tapping his glass with a spoon for silence. The room fell into a hushed, expectant quiet. He looked first at the crowd, the confident, benevolent king surveying his loyal subjects, and then he looked at my mother. "My darling Catherine," he began, his voice a low, intimate, and perfectly rehearsed melody of love. 25 years ago, on this very weekend, you made me the luckiest man on earth. You have been my partner, my rock, my conscience." He paused, letting the weight of his lies settle. "You have given me a beautiful life, a beautiful home, and a beautiful, brilliant daughter who makes me proud every single day." He looked directly at me, and his eyes were full of a smug, paternalistic pride. The look said, "See? The intervention worked. The problem is solved. The family is perfect." "They say the secret to a long marriage is honesty," he continued, the words dripping with a terrible, beautiful irony. "But I think it's trust. It is the sacred, unspoken trust between two people. It is the foundation upon which everything else is built." He raised his glass high. "To my wife, my life, my everything. And to 25 more years. 25 more years," the room echoed. As the applause died down, he remained standing. "And now," he said, his smile widening to close out the toasts, "my brilliant and beautiful daughter. Amelia has put together a little tribute to our 25 years together. Mia, darling, the stage is yours." A spotlight found me. All 300 faces turned in my direction. This was it. It's the point of no return. Stood up, my legs feeling strangely disconnected from my body. I walked toward the small stage, where a massive projection screen had been set up, my evening bag clutched in my hand. I felt like I was walking through water. I reached the podium. I looked out at the sea of expectant faces. I saw my mother in the front row, her face beaming, her eyes shining with happy, proud tears. I saw my father looking at me with that look of absolute ownership. I took a deep breath. I connected the USB drive to the laptop. I took the microphone from its stand. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "That was a beautiful speech. It's hard to find the words to sum up 25 years of a life, a family. I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the room. So I thought it would be better to just show you. I looked at the tech in the back of the room. I've put together something that I think truly captures the full story of this family. I gave the tech a small nod. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The sentimental piano music began to play from the speakers. And I pressed play. The video started exactly as everyone expected. A black and white photo of my parents on their wedding day, young and beautiful. A series of photos of me as a baby, a toddler, a little girl with missing teeth. The crowd murmured its approval. Ah, I heard someone whisper. My mother was openly weeping now, dabbing her eyes with a napkin, her hand clutching my father's. The montage continued. Happy Christmases, sunny family vacations, my high school graduation. It was a perfect 5-minute lie, a highlights reel of the Vance family myth. And then it ended. The music swelled to a crescendo, and then, instead of fading out, it was cut short by a single, violent, dissonant piano chord that echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. On the screen, the final happy family photo from our trip to Nantucket faded away. For a second, the screen was black. And then a new image appeared. It was an email. The font was large, easy to read. To ANNALISE@gmail.com. From EVANCE@vancelaw.com. Subject: Last night. The text of the email was simple. Last night was a bore. I could only think of you. Tell me you're waiting for me. The date at the top of the email was from the day after their 20th anniversary. A confused, nervous ripple went through the crowd. People shifted in their seats. Someone let out a short, awkward laugh, assuming it was a technical glitch. My mother's smile faltered. My father's face went rigid. The piano music was gone, replaced by a low, ominous, atmospheric piece. The kind of music from a thriller, the kind that plays just before the killer is revealed. The slideshow continued, but the rhythm was different now, faster, more brutal. A photo of my father accepting a philanthropy award for community integrity, immediately followed by a scanned page from the Black Ledger. A red circle highlighting the line, Sterling Trust Account, illegal disbursement, $1.2 million. Smiling on her birthday last year. Immediately. Followed by a screenshot of a bank statement showing the wire transfer of $20,000 to a shell corporation dated the same day. The murmur in the crowd had died, replaced by a stunned, horrified, and absolute silence. No one was moving. No one was breathing. They were all just staring at the screen, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. I had a perfect, elevated view of my parents from the stage. My mother's face had gone completely white. Her hand had fallen from my father's. Her mouth was slightly open. Her eyes fixed on the screen in a state of dawning, catastrophic horror. My father was not looking at the screen. He was looking at me. His face was no longer pale, was a dark, mottled, apoplectic red. His eyes were not full of panic. They were full of a murderous, biblical rage. If he could have killed me with a single thought, I would have burst into flames. The video reached its crescendo. A beautiful, professionally taken photograph of my father and my mother. From the invitation to this very party filled the screen. It hung there for a moment, a perfect image of a perfect couple. And then it slowly crossfaded into the picture I had found on social media. The one of my father in the same suit, the same tie, standing behind his mistress, his hand on her. Back, the final image was a simple bank statement from my father's secret account. It showed a balance of over $4 million. Stolen money, the music stopped. The screen went black. And then a single sentence appeared in plain white text. Congratulations on 25 years of secrets and lies. The screen stayed black, The silence in the room was a physical thing, a solid, unbreathable wall of shock. And then the first sound, single, sharp, shattered sob. It was my mother. Her body went limp and she slumped sideways in her chair, collapsing to the floor in a heap of silver silk. And with that, the silence broke. The room erupted into chaos. People screamed. Chairs scraped against the floor. Mr. Abernathy, my father's law partner, was staring at him with a look of pure, unadulterated horror. My father's clients were backing away from the head table as if it were radioactive. My father stood up, his face a terrifying mask of rage and ruin. He looked at my mother, unconscious on the floor. He looked at the chaos erupting around him. And then he looked at me, still standing on the stage, the microphone in my hand. His world, his perfect, beautiful, and utterly fraudulent world, was on fire. And I was the one who had lit the match. I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a loud, echoing thud, and I calmly, deliberately walked off the stage. Through the pandemonium I had created, and out the nearest emergency exit. Into the cool, dark, and blessedly silent night. I didn't wait to see my mother hit the floor. I didn't wait to see the first flash of a camera phone, or to hear the first panicked cry for a doctor. The moment I dropped the microphone, I turned my back on the inferno I had created and walked. I moved through the chaos with a strange, dreamlike calm, a ghost leaving her own haunting. The screams, the shouts, the scraping of chairs, it was all just a distant, muffled roar, the sound of a world that was no longer mine. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the emergency exit and stepped out into the cool, damp, and blessedly silent night. The air smelled of salt from the sound and freshly cut grass. It was the smell of my entire suffocating childhood. I walked away from the Belhaven Club, from the manicured lawns, from the life that had been a beautiful gilded cage. I didn't look back. I walked for hours. My elegant, uncomfortable shoes pinched my feet. The night air was cold against my bare arms. I just followed the quiet, tree-lined streets, the opulent houses dark and silent around me, their inhabitants all back at the club, witnessing the social execution of the century. In the distance, I heard the wail of a single ambulance, its siren a lonely, mournful cry in the night. I knew who it was for, and I kept walking. I ended up at the train station, a small, historic building that was deserted at this hour. I sat on a cold, wrought-iron bench under the dim yellow light of the platform. I had my evening bag, my phone, and the clothes I was wearing. That was it. I had just detonated my entire life, and this was all I had left. When the first train to New York rumbled into the station just before dawn, I was on it. I watched from the window as the familiar, perfect landscape of my hometown slid by, giving way to the grittier, more honest decay of the city. I was a refugee, fleeing the smoking ruins of a war one had started, and won. I got a cheap, windowless room in a dingy hotel in Midtown, a place that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and despair. And from this anonymous, grimy bunker, I watched the fallout. The story broke online first. A chaotic torrent of tweets and blurry photos from guests at the party. Then came the gossip columns, their headlines dripping with schadenfreude. Vance's anniversary ends in explosive revelations. Greenwich society rocked by scandal at gala. By Monday morning, it was a legitimate news story. The focus quickly shifted from the salacious details of the affair to the far more serious crime. My father's carefully constructed public image, his most prized possession, was incinerated in the space of 48 hours. Edward Vance, prominent attorney accused of massive embezzlement scheme. Read the headline in the Wall Street Journal. Law firm of Vance, Abernathy, and Low suspends senior partner amidst fraud allegations, announced the New York Times. I read the articles with a kind of detached clinical interest. They detailed his crimes with a brutal efficiency that I had to admire. They had found the shell corporations. They were interviewing his law partners, his clients, Mr. Abernathy. the man who had toasted my father's integrity, gave a statement expressing his profound shock and deep disappointment. He announced that the firm was launching a full internal investigation and cooperating with federal authorities. My father's ruin was swift, total, and merciless. His name was stripped from the firm. He was forced to resign from all of his charity boards. The country club, that temple of social acceptance, revoked his membership. He was no longer a pillar of the community. It was a pariah, a disgrace. The man who had been terrified of a single imaginary dent in his family's reputation was now the author of its complete and utter destruction. My family, what was left of it, did not contact me. I was the architect of this destruction, a traitor who had broken the sacred, unspoken code of the wealthy. Thou shalt not air thy dirty laundry in public. I was, in their world, a monster far worse than my father. He was just a common criminal. I was the one who had committed the unforgivable sin of telling the truth out loud. The only communication I received came a week after the party. A crisp, formal-looking envelope was slipped under my hotel room door. It was from my mother's new lawyer. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000 and a handwritten letter on my mother's elegant cream-colored stationery. "Amelia," she wrote. Her handwriting was shaky. "I am told you are in New York. I am sending you this money. It is all I can access right now, as your father's assets have been frozen. Do not try to contact me. I have spent the last week in a state of shock. My life, the life I thought I had, is over. The man I thought I was married to does not exist. I have filed for divorce. I do not know what to feel about what you have done. There are moments when I am consumed with a rage at you so profound. It frightens me. You have destroyed me, Amelia. You have taken my life, my marriage, my social standing, my entire world. And you have burned it to the ground in the most public and cruel way imaginable. And then there are other moments of a strange, terrifying clarity. And in those moments, I know that you did not destroy my life. You saved me from a lie I have been living in for 25 years. You have given me the truth, and it is a terrible, ugly, and unbearable gift. But it is the truth. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for the cruelty of your method. I don't know if I ever want to see you again. All I know is that the woman who is writing this letter is a stranger to me. And the woman who was dancing with her husband a week ago is dead, and you are the one who killed her. Goodbye, Catherine. I read the letter a dozen times. The tears I had refused to shed finally blurring her words. I had not just destroyed my father, I'd shattered my mother. My revenge was complete. And it felt exactly like I had always suspected it would. It felt like grief. I stayed in New York for another month, watching the final act of my father's downfall from a safe distance. The federal indictment came down. He was charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. He was facing up to 30 years in prison. The Vance family assets, the trust he had tried to use to cage me, were all seized to pay back the clients he had stolen from. My inheritance, my financial future, was gone. My revenge had cost me everything, and it was the best deal I had ever made. I was, for the first time in my life, completely and utterly free from his money and his control. There was nothing left for me in Greenwich. My home was gone. My family was a memory. I was an exile, a pariah. And so I did what all exiles do. I disappeared. I bought a bus ticket. I packed my one small bag, and I left the East Coast, the site of my old life, behind me. I traveled west, through the vast, anonymous heart of the country. I was searching not for a destination, but for a place where I could be a stranger. Place where the name Vance meant nothing. I found it in a small, quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. A city of rain and roses, and people who did not care where you came from. I used the last of my mother's money to rent a small, sparsely furnished room in a shared house with 3 other students. was a world away from the manicured lawns and colonial mansions of my past. It was real. My life now is small, and it is quiet, and it is my own. I got a job at a sprawling, chaotic used bookstore, a place that smells of old paper and dust and coffee. I spend my days shelving books, the stories of other people's lives. I am taking classes at the local community college, retaking the credits I lost when I dropped out of my fancy university. I am studying history. I am, for the first time, learning the truth about the world. Not just the carefully curated version my father had paid for me to learn. Sometimes, late at night, I will look out the window of my small room. I don't see the Long Island Sound, or a perfectly manicured garden. I see a wet, glistening street under the orange glow of a streetlight. I see a neighbor's messy, overgrown yard. I see the real, imperfect, and unpredictable world. My revenge is complete. The ledger is closed. I blew up my own life to escape a gilded cage. I am estranged from my family. I am poor. I am, in the eyes of the world I came from, a complete and total failure. But I am free. And as I stand, here in the quiet of my own small, hard-won life, I know, with a certainty that settles deep in my bones, that I have never been more successful.